Welcome to our channel, Fiction Wizard, a fantasy story explainer.
Episode 2 begins. Jinho, wide-eyed, looked at the summoned figures before him. Hyungnim, what are these guys? Sung Jinwoo, with a small smile, replied, Ah, it's your first time seeing this, isn't it, Jinho? It's my skill. Wait, with just a skill, you can summon them? Jinho asked, disbelief written all over his face. It's a bit complicated to explain, but they're convenient, Jinwoo answered, watching his shadow soldiers. They hunt for me, and they even help with chores. Jinho, trying to find his role, sheepishly asked, Hyungnim, can I at least collect the magic crystals? Why? Jinwoo chuckled, amused. I feel like I've lost my place, Jinho admitted. Jinwoo found it entertaining. He thought to himself, with this, raids with Jinho should be finished tomorrow. The promise with Jinho to clear 19 raids has finished, and the next day, in the eastern United States, chaos unfolded within an A-rank dungeon. Jesus! Shouted one of the hunters. Our entire attack force got annihilated. James, an A-rank hunter, looked on in disbelief as they faced a terrifying human-type monster. We couldn't find a single monster in the dungeon, James said. I thought something was strange, but to think such a monster would appear in the boss room. The magic power emitted by the monster was unlike anything they'd encountered. It was powerful enough to match an A-rank dungeon on its own. Just how powerful is this monster? One of the remaining hunters wondered as they edged closer, fear gripping their every movement. A voice interrupted them. Don't get any closer, Jinwoo said. His ears throbbed from their shouting. Don't worry, I didn't kill them. I just knocked them out. The hunters stood stunned as Jinwoo continued. Why did you guys attack me? I'm not a monster. I'm human. But it became clear they didn't understand him. With a sigh, Jinwoo muttered to himself, Not like they can understand me anyway. I'm Korean. I want to go home. With the raids now complete, Jinho sat with Jinwoo one last time. Hyungnim, I'm sorry, Jinho said. I wanted to take you somewhere more luxurious for our last meal. Jinwoo waved it off. No, I'm just worried this doesn't suit the taste of someone from a rich household like yourself, he teased. So, what do you plan on doing next? Jinwoo checked his status, content with his progress. Since the raids are over, I'll finish the paper exam from the association and get my guild master's license. Then I'll talk to my father. Jinho looked thoughtful. It's nice that you get a 30 billion building, but your real goal was leveling up, right? Jinwoo nodded. I've met my goal, so I don't need to hang around anymore. But what about you, Jinho? What will you do? Before Jinho could respond, Jinwoo held up an item, a key. A key that can open the demon castle's door. Obtained by killing the gatekeeper. I'll be out of contact for a while. There's someplace I have to go. Jinho, feeling uncertain, said, Hyungnim, if I'm a nuisance to you, just tell me. I won't bother you again. Jinwoo, surprised by his tone, asked, Jinho, what am I to you? Jinho hesitated before speaking. I have an older brother, but he's about 10 years older than me. We're not close. He doesn't like me much, so we don't spend much time together. But you, Hyungnim, you saved my life and helped me with my problems. You're more of a brother to me than my real brother. Moved by his words, Jinwoo smiled. If that's how you think of me, I'll consider you my younger brother. Tears welled up in Jinho's eyes. Hyungnim, can I hug you? Jinwoo, taken aback, quickly deflected. Hey, you're drunk. No, Hyungnim, I've never been more awake. Jinwoo shook his head, laughing. You were something else. Suddenly, a more serious tone took over the conversation. The media had been abuzz with reports of a massive accident during recruit training. Whispers spread that all the high-ranked hunters had perished and only the low-ranking hunters survived. Is it true? Were the low-rankers helped by someone? The association's investigation already passed. It's not about me. As Jinwoo prepared to leave, a call came in for him. Master, Hunter Min Byonggu is calling. Shall I connect you? Jinwoo nodded. On the other line, Min Byonggu's voice came through. Baekhyung, why is your phone off? Reporters are everywhere. Jinwoo sighed. I'm hiding until they stop talking. Well, I have some big news, Min Byonggu said. Japan secretly contacted the Korean Hunters Association. What? Japan? Jinwoo was caught off guard. Yeah, they're asking for consultations with hunters who were involved in the Jeju Island raid. Jinwoo's expression darkened at the mention of Jeju Island. The memories of that nightmare flooded back, of near-death experiences and the countless monsters. I heard something's changed, Min Byonggu continued. There's been a mutation. Jinwoo frowned. A mutation? It shouldn't matter. They're stuck on the island. Min Byonggu's voice grew more serious. Well, they're not stuck anymore. They can leave. An ant with wings was found in Japan's coastal region. Jinwoo's eyes widened. They're evolving, he whispered. Hey, Papa, you don't go out as much these days, she remarked, looking curiously at him. And now, all of a sudden, you're going on a trip? I'll be away for a week, he responded, avoiding her gaze. Who are you going with? Did my appa find someone special? She teased. Just going with a friend, he replied quickly, thinking back to the time he fought Kerberos. Back then, it was at least 20 levels higher than him. Now, his levels had tripled. There was no way he'd struggle like before. As he opened his inventory, he saw it, the castle door key, a key that could open the demon castle's door. He had obtained it after defeating the gatekeeper. Would you like to use the key to enter? He hovered over it, thoughts racing in his mind. Just then, a new quest arrived. A quest? He muttered, feeling a sense of familiarity, but the hallway he was in felt strange. He couldn't sense any monsters around. The quest was clear: collect demon souls. Demons filled the castle, and he needed to gather 10,000 souls for a special reward. The rewards were incredible: an item of his choosing, 20 bonus stats, and a hidden reward. His heart raced. With rewards this great, the challenge ahead would surely be tough. But as he ventured deeper, he couldn't see a single monster. The castle seemed endless. Is this a field-type dungeon? He wondered aloud as he started piecing together the challenge. It felt like an entire recreation of soul, just in a different dimension. Gathering 10,000 demon souls meant there were at least that many demons lurking in the castle. And if he was lucky, he might encounter demons with multiple souls on the upper floors. He had told everyone he was just going on a trip, but now he wondered, will a week be enough? As he encountered his first set of demons, it was clear they were easy prey. 3 low-grade demons down, he noted as he received 100 experience points for each of them, along with 3 demon souls. He glanced at his experience meter, seeing that he needed 59,700 more points until his next level up. This dungeon had an experience indicator now, and it would be a race against time. Meanwhile, back at the Eugene Guild, a conversation was unfolding. "So, you want to manage the Eugene Guild?" his father asked. "Of course, father," the young man replied confidently, handing over his guild master license and his raid track record. His father sighed, knowing well the rivalry between his two sons. There's a risk in inviting an outsider as the guild master, but he paused, signaling someone to come in. The door opened, revealing a man who looked slightly nervous. "This is Hunter Go Myung-hwan. He's a survivor from the recent White Tiger Redgate incident." "Redgate?" the young man muttered. Confused, Go Myung-hwan sat down, his hands trembling slightly. There was a high school student, a female hunter, and Sung Jinwoo. Thanks to him, we survived the Redgate. The young man's eyes widened. Hyungnim? He was at a Redgate? His mind raced. The pieces were coming together, but it still felt unreal. He could barely contain his surprise. The father watched silently, observing his son's reaction. Sung Jinwoo. He's the key to this guild's future, he thought. The negotiation is tricky, but I need him to understand. "My son, you know as well as I do that leaving the guild to a stranger is a risk," his father finally spoke. "But if you can bring Hunter Sung Jinwoo over to our side, the Eugene Guild will thrive." The young man clenched his fists. This was his chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. "Father, I will do my best," he promised, determination flashing in his eyes. He knew the challenges ahead. Two S-rank hunters, Cha Haein and Min Byung-yu, were still on his radar. But before that, he needed to bring Sung Jinwoo into the fold. The stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, back in the Demon Castle, Sung Jinwoo continued his relentless march. Demon after demon fell before him, and each one added another soul to his tally. The number was steadily growing, 309 souls out of the 10,000 needed. He picked up a small item from one of the defeated demons, a low-grade demon's horn. It wasn't worth much, but these items could be sold for a high price or used as raw materials for powerful magic. His journey was far from over, but Sung Jinwoo knew one thing for certain. Every step forward brought him closer to uncovering the secrets of the Demon Castle and to fulfilling his destiny as the Shadow Monarch. The difficulty of the Demon Castle didn't seem too high at first. As he cleared the area, Jinwoo noticed the monsters were nothing special, giving off a dank aura. And while they weren't challenging, they still provided a decent amount of experience. He compared it to clearing C-rank dungeons, which took 9 runs to raise a single level. Here, it felt like he could achieve that in just 4 hours. Yet, with each level he gained, the amount of experience required increased. He felt the gradual grind, just as he had when he faced Baek Yoon-ho. Even though he was technically S-rank, he knew he was just barely scraping the surface. To become truly stronger, he couldn't afford to slow down in his inventory. He found the entry permit, an item he wasn't sure about, with an unknown classification. It was a pass to the second floor of the Demon Castle, usable at the magic circle on the first floor. Time to move up, he thought. He summoned his shadow soldiers. "Come out," he called, and the chief of Ice Bears appeared. Massive, like a living tank, it charged forward, wreaking havoc. But the real challenge came in the form of Sneaky, annoying enemies that darted around, trying to impede his progress. "Run until you reach the magic circle," he commanded, sending his soldiers ahead. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the Bureau of Hunters was in a tense meeting. "Is that him?" a man asked, his voice low and serious. "Yes, sir," another answered, nodding. They were speaking about a South Korean hunter, a man who had somehow managed to escape from a dungeon on the other side of the world. He claims he was trapped when the gate closed 10 years ago and only recently emerged, finding himself here in the United States. The deputy director shook his head in disbelief. A human came through an A-rank gate, and A-rank hunters couldn't touch him? They suspected he might not be human at all, but something worse, possibly a monster carrying human memories. "We can't afford to take any risks with this man," the director warned. "The entire capital could be in danger." The interrogation was set to resume the next day, with the Scavenger Guild's top hunter, Ong, on his way back from Korea. His mission? To extract as much information as possible from this mysterious figure, Sung Jinwoo. Back in the Demon Castle, Jinwoo was moving up the floors. Each one was like a separate world, with different environments and challenges. Monsters holding the entry permit appeared randomly, and without that pass, it was impossible to progress to the next floor. As he ascended, passing through the second, third, and fourth floors, he realized the enormity of the place. If this tower had 100 floors, it meant there were 100 worlds to conquer. By the time he reached the 27th floor, the challenges had increased in intensity. He defeated a mid-level demon and gained 300 experience points along with a demon soul. But the real problem was time. Collecting 10,000 souls to complete his quest was one thing, but making it to the top in a week seemed impossible. When he first acquired the Demon Castle key, he feared it would lead him to an S-rank dungeon. However, as time passed and the battles dragged on, that anxiety began to fade. By the 50th floor, he had collected 2,561 souls, but the real challenge was about to begin. The floor master of the lower levels, avaricious Vulcan, awaited him. Vulcan's guards, hulking demons in their own right, detected Jinwoo's approach. "Capture them!" one of the guards shouted, and the battle was on. Jinwoo had spent considerable time enhancing his shadow soldiers, bolstering their strength with his intelligence stat. Not only that, the number of shadows he could control had increased significantly. His mana regeneration was keeping up with the demands of the battle, but Vulcan was no ordinary foe. The demon stood still, watching, not moving a muscle. Jinwoo knew he had to act. With swift movements, Jinwoo launched himself at Vulcan, but the demon countered, moving faster than Jinwoo expected. "What is that movement?" Jinwoo muttered, realizing this would be a tougher fight than anticipated. His status screen popped up, displaying his stat strength, and he had already collected 4,388 demon souls. The floor's ruler, Vulcan, unleashed a skill called Wrath, a familiar move that Jinwoo had seen before, used by the fierce Cerberus. Vulcan's rage made him faster and increased his stats by 50%. The difference in speed became immediately apparent. Vulcan charged, and Jinwoo quickly realized that avoiding the attack was impossible. It was going to hit hard, and even with his strength, it would be difficult to hold out for long. His shadow soldier, Iron, tried to block the blow, but Vulcan was relentless. Jinwoo needed to find an opening for a counterattack. As Vulcan's next attack came, Jinwoo saw a chance. He needed to act fast, but being airborne made it impossible to dodge. His mind raced. If only I could move my body. Then a thought hit him. Wait, move my body. His skill dominator's touch activated just in time. Even though he couldn't stop Vulcan, he could use the recoil from the attack to push himself back. It worked, narrowly avoiding disaster. Vulcan's movements were grotesque and powerful. The only place Jinwoo could strike effectively was on the demon's head, but aiming for such a vital spot was dangerous. He needed to find a way to stop Vulcan's movements first, to create a situation where the demon couldn't dodge. With his heart racing, Jinwoo focused. Vulcan was enraged and no longer thinking clearly. That was good. It meant he could exploit his blind rage. Jinwoo dashed forward, baiting Vulcan to follow him. Now, Jinwoo whispered to himself, activating his skill, sprint. Even if Vulcan noticed the trap, it was too late. At the speed Vulcan was moving, stopping abruptly would be impossible. The massive demon charged forward, roaring in frustration. Meanwhile, elsewhere, people were asking about Jinwoo's whereabouts. A young man from Unit 902 was curious. Where's Hunter Sung Jinwoo? I haven't seen him lately. He said he was going on a week-long trip with a friend, another answered. Investigators had even spoken with Han Song-yi, who was close with Jinwoo's younger sister. But something didn't add up. There was no trace of Jinwoo leaving the country, no records of him withdrawing money, and no activity on his credit card. The Hunter Association's tracker had last placed him somewhere downtown, but he had vanished without a trace. Could he have been kidnapped? Someone speculated. To abduct someone like Sung Jinwoo, it would take an elite squad of high-ranking hunters, maybe even China's special unit, another replied. Park Hee-jin, someone who knew Jinwoo personally, wondered the same. Just where in the world had he disappeared to? Jinwoo stood over the remains of the boss-grade monster, Vulcan. As expected from such a powerful foe, the loot was impressive. He picked up the demon monarch's earring and examined it. Next came the orb of avarice and Vulcan's horn, a rare drop that would surely be useful in the future. Lastly, an ingredient item, a world tree's fragment. This fragment was a piece of wood left over from the corrupted parts of Vulcan's club, which had been crafted from a branch of the world tree. Its magical properties were unparalleled, and Jinwoo knew better than to toss it aside. An ingredient for top-grade magic items, he thought. I'll find a use for this. Among the items, the demon monarch's earring stood out. It was an S-class accessory that boosted his strength and vitality by 20 each. But more interesting was the set effect that would be triggered if he found the matching necklace and ring. Will I find the rest of the set if I keep hunting demons here? Jinwoo wondered. I guess I'll find out soon enough. Then there was the Orb of Avarice. Its current class was A, but its magic amplification effects made it a dangerous tool. It doubled magic damage, an ability that would make any magic-type hunter go wild. Jinwoo sighed, knowing it wasn't suited for him. If only I had magic-type skills, he mused. I could have used this myself. As he tucked the items away, he noticed the atmosphere had shifted. A voice interrupted his thoughts. I didn't expect such an interesting incident to develop the moment I arrived in Washington, a figure said. How amazing. Jinwoo turned to see the speaker. A monster that can speak to a human is amazing. And it's speaking Korean. Jinwoo bristled. I'm not a monster. If you doubt me, run a DNA test or something. I'm human. Regardless, the figure continued. We need to stay cautious. You came out of a gate. For all we know, a monster could be disguising itself as a human. Jinwoo sighed. It would be in your best interest to cooperate with me. I can determine whether you're a monster or human, and if I refuse, Jinwoo asked, his eyes narrowing. The figure shifted uncomfortably. Did you die in a dungeon? How did you survive in there for 10 years? Are you undead? No, Jinwoo replied, his patience wearing thin. The interrogator's voice softened. Could someone who died in a dungeon come back, just like you? Could my brother? Jinwoo shook his head. It's impossible. The dead cannot return. The figure clenched his fists. Then my brother is gone. His voice trailed off in despair. But Jinwoo had his questions. You mentioned a greatest disaster. What is it? I cannot say, the figure replied, evading the question. But the disasters you see now, dungeons, gates, monsters, they're just a prelude to the real war. The greatest disaster has already awakened, and my mission is to stop it. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. If you know what this disaster is, shouldn't you work with others to stop it? Strength in numbers. The figure shook his head. Numbers mean nothing against this power. Even if people gathered together, they'd just be used as pawns. Jinwoo smirked. You think I'm strong? That's rich. The man raised an eyebrow. Only someone like you can stop it. I have no interest in dealing with your riddles, Jinwoo replied coldly. What's your real name? The figure hesitated. Sung Jinwoo. Jinwoo froze. Jinwoo? The name triggered something within him. You were in a dungeon for 10 years and survived? You have a wife, Park Kyung-hee, and 2 children, Jina and Jinwoo. Do you remember them? Sung Jinwoo's eyes flashed with recognition. Sung Jinwoo, my son. Before Jinwoo could react, a wave of bloodlust filled the room. His father's demeanor had changed completely. I told you, Sung Jinwoo said with an eerie calm. I'm the one asking questions here. Jinwoo braced himself. And if I don't answer? I'll use force if necessary, his father warned. This may be a second chance given by the gods. If you oppose me, you'll see why. The deputy director nearby panicked. This man is a monster. He's about to attack. Evacuate now. But Jinwoo wasn't fazed. I know exactly what you're planning. He glanced at his shadows. Iron, Igris, open a path. Sung Jinwoo's eyes widened as Jinwoo's shadow soldiers moved swiftly. You didn't expect this, did you? Jinwoo taunted. Surprised by how strong my soldiers are? Can the undead feel fear? A tense silence followed as the father and son stood face to face. Jinwoo stood over the fallen body of Metus, the guide of souls, feeling the rush of victory wash over him. As the system notifications flooded his vision, he noted the rewards. He had received spring water of the echoing forest, 200,000 experience points, and discovered a pendant with demon souls sealed within. In total, he collected 220 demon souls and rose by 2 levels. Metus had been a powerful foe, wielding magic capable of controlling hundreds of summons, far more than Jinwoo had ever seen. He had hoped to turn Metus into one of his shadow soldiers, but something felt off. His mana was contaminated, and for reasons beyond understanding, shadow extraction wasn't possible on demons. Frustrated, Jinwoo accepted that he would have to move on without Metus. Despite this, The boss-grade monster had dropped a valuable item, the Demon Monarch's necklace. This accessory was part of a set, and when combined with the Demon Monarch's earring, which Jinwoo had already equipped, it would trigger powerful effects. There was still one piece missing, the Demon Monarch's ring, but finding it meant facing another boss-grade monster. One more to complete the set, he thought, his excitement rising. However, Jinwoo had already met his goal. With over 10,000 demon souls collected, his quest was complete. He took a deep breath, realizing he had reached his limit. There wasn't enough strength left in him to continue forward. Not yet. The system prompted him to claim his rewards. He was presented with 3 options: an item of his choosing, 20 bonus stat points, or a hidden reward. The first reward was tempting. With his current balance of 100 million gold, he could buy amazing equipment, but Jinwoo knew that dungeon crawling provided better gear with time. He didn't want to make a rash choice that he might regret later. He decided on a random item instead. Selecting the cursed random box, he recalled his previous experience with the blessed random box, which had given him what he wanted: rare items and a key to the demon castle. This time, however, the cursed box would provide something he needed. He opened the box, revealing an unknown item. It had no name, no description, just a question mark. "What is this used for?" he wondered aloud. "I guess I'll find out someday." The second reward was straightforward: 20 bonus stat points. Jinwoo invested all of them into intelligence, feeling his mental capacity increase as his stats updated. Strength 178, Vitality 137, Agility 147, Intelligence 149, Sense 119. He was growing stronger by the day, and soon, no one would stand in his way. The final reward intrigued him the most: a recipe for the holy water of life. This mysterious potion could cure any disease, a powerful tool that might save his mother. The ingredients for the holy water of life had slowly fallen into place. He had already acquired 2 of the 3 necessary components: the World Trees fragment from Vulcan on the 50th floor and the spring water of the echoing forest from Metus. The last item, the purified blood of the Demon King, was still missing, but Jinwoo knew where to find it. It would be with the Demon Castle's final boss on the highest floor. Determined, Jinwoo clenched his fists. "If I clear the Demon Castle, I will have everything I need to save my mom." The climb had been difficult, but he had raised his level by 16 in just 1 week. Meanwhile, the Korean Hunters Association prepared for a major event: the re-evaluation of Sung Jinwoo's rank. Word of his growing power had reached influential figures like Baek Yoon-ho, and soon, Jinwoo would face a new set of challenges beyond the dungeon walls. But for now, his focus remained on one thing: saving his mother. "Wait for me, Mom," he whispered. "I'll end this charade soon." "Next person, please come in," the voice called from within the dimly lit evaluation room. It was a familiar sight, an old tradition carried on over the years as men and women stepped forward with varying degrees of anxiety. The man standing near the entrance greeted each new arrival with the same words, trying to calm their nerves. "Nothing has changed since the old days," he said, with a calm smile. "There's no need to be nervous." For some, it was impossible not to be. "There are a few who have had their lives turned upside down," he continued, his voice low but steady. "But it's not common." His eyes scanned the waiting room, landing on a young man sitting in the corner, his hands trembling slightly. "If you end up with a D rank or higher, though, you'll get the attention of scouts. Scouts? The young man spoke up, curiosity piqued. Yeah, they're from various guilds. Small guilds especially, they don't get many hunters joining them, the man explained. So they wait here, trying to attract hunters right after their evaluation. The man's tone grew more serious. But if you can avoid it, don't join the smaller guilds. They frequently attempt dangerous raids, and they have a high death ratio. The young man blinked, suddenly more alert. Why do they do that? From a small guild's perspective, it can't be helped, the man answered, shrugging. They can't just sit around running low-rank dungeons like a personal raid squad, but at the same time, they lack the strength to clear high-rank dungeons. So, no wonder accidents are frequent. The line moved, and another figure stepped forward into the evaluation room. The next candidate was now standing nervously before the black crystal, ready to be evaluated. Man, wearing a long coat, entered the room next. He looked worn, like he had been through battles far more grueling than this one. His thoughts raced. I'll get a C rank at least. If I can pay off my debt, I'll be able to live with my daughter like before. Ranks were life-changing. A hunter's strength was determined by their rank, and no matter how hard they trained, it was difficult to close the gap set by their initial evaluation. Even Mr. Song Chi-yeol, despite his expertise, couldn't stand up against higher-ranked hunters. Rank determines everything. He approached the crystal, placed his hand on it, and after a brief moment, "E-rank," the voice called out. The man's heart sank. The evaluator didn't bat an eye. "Next person, please." "Are you feeling okay?" asked the assistant, looking at the young man who had just entered. "No, it's not that," Sung Jinwoo said, voice trembling. "I'm just a bit nervous. Would you like to go ahead first?" The assistant offered. "Sure," Jinwoo responded, stepping forward. His name was called, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The assistant looked over the clipboard, furrowing his brow. "You've been evaluated before? E-rank, right?" "Yes," Jinwoo nodded. "All right, place your hand on the crystal again." He did as instructed, and suddenly the room grew cold. The assistant's eyes widened as the crystal began to hum and flicker, an error displaying on the machine. "Hold on, let's try that again." Another flicker, another error. "This has never happened before," the assistant mumbled, his voice shaky. "I'll get the manager." Moments later, the assistant manager arrived, clearly agitated. "What's going on here?" he barked. "We're getting an error again," the assistant stammered. The assistant manager frowned. "This hasn't happened since Chahayan 2 years ago." Sung Jinwoo stood there, confused. What was happening? "Get Chong Shik here now," the assistant manager ordered. "And don't tell me he's still on break. This is urgent." More staff gathered around the machine, all of them whispering nervously. "It's immeasurable," someone whispered. "Immeasurable?" Jinwoo overheard. "Yes," the assistant manager said, his voice trembling. "The detector can't measure his magic power." The room fell silent. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension, booming with authority. "That man is South Korea's 10th. Heads turned as Choi Jong-in. The room was abuzz with whispers. "That man is Choi Jong-in?" someone murmured, their voice a mix of awe and curiosity. Everyone's eyes followed the figure as he entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. Choi Jong-in was no ordinary hunter. His mastery of top-tier magic was legendary. Stories floated around that he could obliterate an entire building with a single spell. They called him the ultimate soldier, a nickname earned from countless battles and feats of magic. As Choi Jong-in joined the Hunters Guild, it seemed like the top guild had reached a whole new level. Even the other hunters, who were no strangers to strength and skill, couldn't help but be impressed by him. The whispers grew louder. Was it already arranged for him to join the guild? The Hunters Guild, after all, was known for recruiting only the best. It was no surprise that Choi Jong-in had caught their eye. Amid the growing excitement, there was one name that stood out: Sung Jinwoo. He was the talk of the hunters, an E-rank who had somehow garnered attention for his sudden rise in power. And not just any rise. Sung Jinwoo had been re-evaluated as an S-rank hunter, a feat that was almost unheard of. As Choi Jong-in stepped forward to meet him, it was clear that the Hunters Guild had taken a special interest in this young man. "Excuse me," Choi Jong-in began, his tone polite but authoritative. "It looks like you've just received your evaluation. Do you already have a guild in mind? If not, I would like to take some of your time to discuss this matter." But to everyone's shock, Sung Jinwoo declined. "I'm sorry, but I must decline." Choi Jong-in blinked in surprise. Was he just rejected? This was a man who rarely faced rejection, especially not from someone who had just been classified as S-rank. But Sung Jinwoo didn't seem fazed. He had other plans. There were more pressing matters for him, like returning to the demon castle to craft the medicine he desperately needed. As Sung Jinwoo walked away, vanishing from sight as if he had never been there, Choi Jong-in couldn't help but be intrigued. "He must be an excellent assassin-type hunter," he muttered. If Sung Jinwoo were to join the hunters, they would have 3 S-rank hunters in their ranks. The possibilities seemed endless. But then, another powerful figure appeared: Baek Yoon-ho, president of the White Tiger Guild. His arrival seemed just as urgent, and it was clear that he, too, was chasing after Sung Jinwoo. There was a silent competition brewing between the guilds, each one wanting to secure Sung Jinwoo for themselves. Baek Yoon-ho had known about him all along, ever since that mysterious incident during the White Tiger Guild's training session. The outsider, the one Baek Yoon-ho couldn't stop, that man was Sung Jinwoo. Meanwhile, Sung Jinwoo was dealing with his internal battles. He thought about his mother, still trapped in an eternal slumber, a disease that had surfaced ever since the gates had started appearing. "I will save you," he whispered to himself. "Just wait for me. I need to get stronger." But strength alone wasn't enough. Sung Jinwoo realized that if even the mid-bosses in the demon castle were so strong, he might not survive his confrontation with the top-floor boss. Yet, his determination never wavered. In the midst of all this, the Hunter Association's chairman, Go Gun-hee, requested a meeting with Sung Jinwoo. The chairman was a towering figure, despite his age, reminding Sung Jinwoo of a retired wrestler. "I would like to congratulate you on becoming an S-rank hunter," Go Gun-hee began. But Sung Jinwoo knew there was more to this meeting than mere congratulations. The chairman explained that while Sung Jinwoo still had another re-examination left, the process was mostly a formality. "To tell you the truth, the re-examination is meaningless," Go Gun-hee admitted. The evaluation system was never designed to measure power beyond the S-rank level. It couldn't even distinguish between S-rank, SS rank, or the rare SSS rank. So why bother with the re-examination? Sung Jinwoo asked, His curiosity piqued. Go gun, he smiled. It's to buy us time. Time for us to meet with S-rank hunters like yourself before anyone else can. He explained that the Hunter Association, unlike the powerful guilds, couldn't offer the fame or wealth that others might promise. But they could offer something different, a chance to take a unique path, to flourish in ways that the guilds couldn't provide. Sung Jinwoo listened carefully, weighing his options. The chairman's offer was tempting, not because of money or glory, but because of the potential it held. Yet, the road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges that only someone of his newfound strength could face. For Sung Jinwoo, this was just the beginning. His journey was far from over, and he knew that greater battles awaited him, both in the dungeons and within himself. Above them, controlling much of the balance, is the Hunter Association. A powerful force, the association isn't just about protecting the people from creatures, but maintaining order in a world that is slowly unraveling due to the might of its top guilds. Are you aware of the top 5 guilds? The voice of Go Gun-hee cut through the conversation. They're the dinosaurs, the ones holding up the country's balance by sheer force. If you were to join any of those, the balance would tip, and this country would fall into chaos. The weight of his words hung in the air. He paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. Normal government authority is no match for these hunters. That's why the Hunter Association is so crucial. Monsters aren't the only monsters we face. The hunters themselves, they too can be monsters. The words were serious, and the tension was thick. Go Gun-hee's eyes locked onto Sung Jinwoo, waiting for a response. Why are you offering this to me? Jinwoo asked, confused. He understood the power the association held, but joining them was another matter altogether. Go Gun-hee looked at him, almost as if he were trying to gauge his thoughts. Anyone with my backing is destined for success. The National Assembly, the government, the media, and all bow to my influence. There's nowhere in this country where I don't have a foothold. Jinwoo's mind raced. He wasn't the type to easily trust in promises or rely on influence, but the association's words had weight. This wasn't just about the monsters. It was about control, power, and the survival of the nation. He glanced down, his thoughts momentarily drifting. It's not a bad proposal, Jinwoo admitted, but deep down, he knew what he wanted. Joining the association meant leaving behind his true goal, leveling up and growing stronger on his terms, not within the confines of a larger organization. Go Gun-hee, sensing his hesitation, smiled, but it was a somber smile. This is not a chance that comes often. The Hunter Association is the 6th and only force that differs from the top 5 guilds. If you join, we will stand together to protect the country. Jinwoo's mind flickered back to his past battles, his time in the dungeons, and his journey of growth. The longer he stayed in the dungeons, the more he could level up and improve. And he knew this for sure. He had to stay in the dungeons. That was where his power truly lay. I'm sorry, but I can't join the association, he said quietly, but resolutely. Go Gun-hee's face remained calm, though his eyes showed understanding. The association will be waiting for when you're ready. Jinwoo nodded politely, his thoughts already drifting away. He had other things to do. Thank you for your time, he said before turning and leaving. As Jinwoo left the room, his heart began to beat faster. There was something about the Hunter Association's offer that tugged at him. Was it truly an opportunity or a trap? Could he trust the words of the man who seemed to hold so much power? as the door closed behind him. His thoughts turned to his sister, who was waiting for him at home. He had made a promise to her, and he intended to keep it. Later that day, Jinwoo found himself alone, reflecting on his past encounters and the strange whispers about monsters. Some hunters, like Sung Jinwoo, were rumored to be more than just hunters. The Bureau had been after him, but they couldn't catch him. Was he a monster, or was something deeper at play? In the dark, Jinwoo remembered the words of the Bureau. This is a video caught by the CCTV that day. They had seen something, but had they understood what they were witnessing? He thought back to his own experiences with healing magic. He had hoped that it would restore him, give him back some of the youth he had lost. But it was all lies. No amount of advanced healing magic could reverse time. He was stuck in this body, this aging shell, but his heart still beat strong. The top guilds are strengthening now, and their power is already on par with the nation's military. Go gun, he had warned him. He understood the stakes. The top 5 guilds were powerful, but they were also unpredictable. As Jinwoo prepared to leave for another dungeon, he found himself confronted by the reality of his choices. He couldn't let the nation's fate rest in the hands of the powerful guilds. He knew that, for better or worse, the future of this country depended on the hunters and their ability to control the monsters, both in the dungeons and within themselves. But before anything else, he had to make sure his path was clear. He couldn't allow himself to be distracted. His mind was set. The dungeons were where he needed to be. And as for the Hunter Association, that was a world he might enter someday. But not today. Not while he still had his battles to fight. The Hunter auction was a unique market, both online and offline, where hunters could buy and sell equipment or materials obtained from their raids. The country was teeming with hunters, tens of thousands of them, and this auction provided a convenient space for them to trade their gear. For a hunter, their equipment was more than just a tool. It was their lifeline. The better the equipment, the safer they were in the dangerous dungeons, facing monsters that could easily end their lives. But for E and D-rank hunters, those struggling financially, fully equipping themselves was often out of reach. Their lower incomes meant they couldn't afford the high-quality gear that their higher-ranked counterparts easily purchased. As a hunter prepared to leave a raid, his team's chatter filled the air. "Looks like it's done," one of them said. "Mr. Bach, you're not dead yet, huh?" Another laughed. "Ha, this is a piece of cake." It seemed their group was well equipped, and their gear had provided them with the protection needed to face the danger. Equipment was a huge advantage, and the hunters who joined more stable attack forces often had the best gear. Magical items imbued with enchantments or enhancements could cost millions of won, and for lower-ranked hunters, even a sword that would be used by a D-rank hunter was a luxury. Didn't Mr. Kim Sang-shik say that he bought this for 3 million won? One of the hunters asked, examining a piece of equipment. Even a basic sword, used by someone higher-ranked, could be out of reach for most. Despite this, the hunter now wielding it sighed. "So expensive. I probably couldn't even afford to touch this, but I'll use this sword for now," he muttered, trying to make the best of what little he had. As he inspected the weapon, his thoughts wandered to the magic inventory system that had been made available to him. It was an incredibly useful tool, allowing him to store and manage items easily. One such item he had recently acquired was the steel blade from Kim Sang-shik, a sword with a +10 attack boost. The value of items used by C-rank or higher hunters was astonishing. These pieces of equipment often cost hundreds of millions of won, and for a hunter like him, who was still working his way up. It was hard to imagine ever being able to afford such luxury. His current savings weren't enough to even consider buying a top-tier artifact. The idea of selling one of his prized items, the Orb of Avarice, crossed his mind. It was an A-class magic item, created by hardening the blood of the high-ranking demon Vulcan. Its effects were incredible, doubling magic damage. The only problem was that it was rare, too rare, and explaining how he had obtained it would be difficult. E-rank hunters weren't supposed to possess such valuable artifacts. It would be suspicious, and he'd need to carefully navigate the situation. Maybe I'll just try the store, he thought, but there was nothing suitable there either. It seemed he would have no choice but to sell the orb. He could likely sell it for a tremendous price, but the problem remained: explaining where he had gotten it. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how complicated his situation was. As an E-rank hunter, he couldn't just join any raid team without attracting suspicion, especially one involving high-level equipment and artifacts. It would take time before he could even hope to obtain an S-rank license. As he continued to consider his options, he received news that a raid team was recruiting. His heart raced as he realized this might be his chance. He checked the details. The team was from the Hunters Guild. This wasn't just any team. This was a mining team, a group tasked with extracting ores within a dungeon after the monsters had been cleared. As he joined the team, he couldn't help but reflect on his past. The other hunters looked at him with suspicion, wondering how a low-ranked hunter like him had survived for so long. His record showed that he had spent years as the weakest among the E-ranks. His past had been full of injuries and setbacks, but he had held on. His mother's medical bills had kept him going, despite all the hardship. "I'm a physical combatant," he told the team when they asked about his combat type. They seemed relieved, but there was still doubt in the AI art. As they prepared to enter the dungeon, he couldn't help but admire the scale of the operation. High-rank dungeons were massive, and it was clear why they divided the work among multiple teams. While the attack force dealt with the monsters, the mining team and collecting team moved in afterward to gather ores and monster remains. The dungeon was deep, and as they entered, Jinwoo felt a mix of nervous excitement. He had always dreamed of seeing such high-ranked dungeons, and now he was about to enter one. The dungeons were dangerous, but he had to face them if he wanted to grow stronger. As they pressed deeper into the dungeon, the team leaders made preparations. The tankers took position as a storm of monsters approached. The battle was fierce, but Jinwoo remained calm, focusing on the task at hand. He was amazed by the strength of the team members and the coordination it took to survive in such a dangerous place. Finally, the attack force emerged victorious. The monsters had been defeated, and the team could now move on. But there was still more to do. The team leader turned to Jinwoo, who had been watching silently. "You did well. We'll be heading out soon," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. The raid had been a success, but as they left the dungeon, Jinwoo couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was just beginning. The Hunters Guild was an intricate web of power and politics, and he had just begun to scratch the surface.